Welcome to the City of Phoenix Workforce Economic Development Subcommittee meeting, October 28th, 2020. I'm Councilwoman Pastor, and I will be chairing this meeting. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Are there any notes called to the public?
There are none, Chairwoman.
Thank you. Minutes of the meetings. Can I get a motion for the minutes of the meetings or any changes?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you. I got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Wearing aye. Motion passes. The second item is information and discussion item. Are there any items, number 2? Do we need to hear it? No, yay, yes, no?
Are you
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Information and discussion. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Item number 2.
So Chairwoman Pastor, members of the subcommittee, Chris Mackey is here to give the presentation today on a historical overview of the Giblet program.
Madam Chair, I'd like the presentation unless.
No. I misread it.
Okay. All right.
Councilman Waring, because normally we have some items that we just don't. So.
Okay. You threw me off
I would love to hear it too.
You just threw me off a little bit, so I want to make sure we heard this because I would like to. Thank you.
It was actually intentional, Councilman Waring.
Jim, you voted yes. That threw her off.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, good morning. I'm here today with the Deputy Director in Community Development, Zandon Keating, to give you a history and an overview of government property lease excise tax, or as we call it, Giblet. So just a history, and I know you're all very familiar with this, but for our viewers, I thought I would take us back just a little bit through the program, how it was created and how it's utilized. So it has been in place since 1996, and it is authorized as an Arizona revised statute and is a program that's used across the state of Arizona. It's a way that government-owned properties which aren't subject to property tax have a mechanism to be on property tax rolls. It's also used as a redevelopment tool, which we'll talk about in just a short bit. It does provide the ability to collect property tax from private entities who lease buildings owned to the government. And what I mean by that, you think of a city or a county or a state-owned building that has a commercial restaurant inside of it, or they have retail shops, or those types of things. While the government entity is property tax exempt, those individuals that are within that property are subject to an excise tax because of Giblet. If Giblet did not exist, the excise tax would not be substituted for property tax, and without that, those private entities that rent government-owned property, their property tax would be zero since governments are not subject to a property tax. So this is a twofold mechanism. One way is to be able to subject those tenants to an excise tax as opposed to a property tax, and second, as we'll go into detail on, as a redevelopment tool. So first, I think I've explained how we are able to tax an excise tax in lieu of property tax for non-government entities using government space. And then secondarily, which Council's most familiar with, is as an economic redevelopment tool that helps facilitate revitalization. We're going to look at Giblet 2 different ways for your review. One will be as a redevelopment, as the redevelopment tool, and then we'll go through the other analysis. So the reason it helps for redevelopment is it can help solve a financial gap for development. And what I mean by that is projects that are coming forward usually have a rate of return that is needed by their lending institutions. And it might be 6%, 6.5%, whatever it is that they're required to have. Projects that tend to be in a redevelopment area don't meet that return on investment. And the Giblet tool is used to help change that gap by somewhere under 1% to allow these projects to happen. It also helps helps level the playing field in projects that are harder to design. So when we think about projects that are moving as the general plan requires in high-rise development or in dense urban development, or they're adjacent to challenging sites, they make it harder to design and more expensive to design, and this tool helps facilitate that. Development costs, as we've talked about with council, the general plan calls for dense urban development in the downtown area, and those development costs can cause similar projects in a greenfield, a larger site in a suburban area to see maybe a third of the cost for development in those particular areas. As an example, high-density residential in a suburban site of 18 acres and 3 stories might be $125 a square foot to build. But in an urban high-rise market, it's about $400 a square foot to build. When you look at parking, it's about $5,000 a stall for surface parking, but between $25,000 and $50,000 a stall for above-grade structured parking and subterranean parking. The entitlement process, as we move through, sometimes the uncertainties of the entitlement process are an area that can be of benefit. When we look at redevelopment areas, land assemblage to build what entities or cities or communities are looking for in those particular areas, it can be of benefit. And of course, as we always face in downtown and some of the redevelopment areas in South Phoenix, environmental issues that have existed for decades, if not thousands of years, whether they're prehistoric or true environmental issues. So first we'll talk about the economic development tool utilized in a central business district. That's what council is most familiar with here in downtown. The downtown area is a declared redevelopment area. City Council just recertified the redevelopment area of downtown just before summer recess. And it needs to be located in a central business district. A redevelopment area is not restricted on size as long as it meets the redevelopment area designations, but a central business district has restrictions that exist in legislation. It can't be greater than 2.5% of the city's municipal planning area, nor can it be twice as wide, can't be any greater than twice as wide as it is long. If you look at Phoenix, we technically could have 12.5 square miles. That is our redevelopment area, that is our central business district, and we're just under 2 square miles. To be able to take advantage of the Giblet, the new construction must improve the value of the land or the property by 100%. Taxing jurisdictions are provided a 60-day notice of the intent of council to hear that item. It is subject to council approval at a formal meeting. And then the selection can be made that property tax can be abated for up to 8 years in that area, or an excise tax could apply for up to a 25-year period. And council has really used this tool thoughtfully as they've looked at the way the market's changed and the way the focus of the area's changed. And in conversations that we've had with the community and with others most recently, I know council is looking at the market changing, how the central business district is changing, and what our focus should be in order to ensure a sustainable market at the end of the day. We have enough balance of jobs and office space to others, to residential, to hotels, and to our retail and restaurants. Now, this tool can also be used in a non-central business district area. So there are a number of redevelopment areas that exist throughout Phoenix. And if you're in one of those redevelopment areas, the project still has to improve the value of the development or the land by 100%. We still have to provide taxing jurisdictions notice. It is still subject to city council approval, but the abatement is not a tool that can be used in a redevelopment area that's not a central business district. In that instance, an excise tax can be levied as opposed to the property tax for up to 25 years to help some of these redevelopment projects happen. The areas where this has been used in Phoenix are for the redevelopment around Sky Harbor, in Sky Harbor Center, and some other areas quite some time ago. Since I've been with the city over the last 6 years, it's not been the focus outside of that area, and that's predominantly due to the excise tax and its increase each year by a producer price index. It's made it a little more not cost effective to be able to use the excise tax in many of the disciplines that we would typically use it in, except multifamily housing. It still could be of benefit on a multifamily housing project. So as we look at this tool in other redevelopment areas around the city, not the downtown and central business district area, this is a tool that could help with workforce housing and that missing middle housing that we're hearing so much from our council and from our community and from the media. And again, to remind you, the abatement option of property tax in an RDA is not available. However, if you're in an RDA with and a council approves a Giblet, a project does receive a 20% reduction, so 80% of the excise tax is paid for the first 10 years, and then it moves on to 100% of the excise tax for the balance of the 15 years for a total of that 25-year total. As we look at redevelopment across the country, property tax is typically something that most states levy to be able to encourage redevelopment in those areas. Redevelopment is not for the faint of heart. It's a very complicated thing in most instances to be able to move forward with. And most states use something called tax increment financing, or TIF. But TIF is not something or tool that we have available in Arizona, but Giblet is one of the tools that we levy in place of TIF, and it's used similarly to TIF in other states. If we look at the property tax revenue and how it's collected on both full ad valorem property tax and on the excise tax, if we look at full ad valorem property tax, in front of you, you will see the breakdown that the county assessor provides back to each taxing jurisdiction. The lion's share goes to the elementary school and the high school district, with elementary school receiving just a little bit more. And then you see in descending order of county, community college, city, and the state education equalization system. When we look at the excise tax, the legislature was very thoughtful in its dispersal of the excise tax. It wanted to make sure that the lion's share, so you see them on equal footing of 36.5% or 70% total between the elementary schools and the high school districts, to be able to provide a funding mechanism, since this could be up to a 25-year term for the educational institutions. And then you see the county, the community college, and the city in descending order. As the city considers a Giblet and the council gives staff direction on its ideas and moving forward, there are two ways that a Giblet can be considered. First, as city is selling its own property, we issue a request for proposal, and in that request for proposal process, the applicant could ask for financial assistance, one being, of course, in the form of a Giblet that council could consider. The other is an application process that is online. It is on the Economic Development website, and it opens up the opportunity to request a Giblet to all private property owners in any redevelopment area and across the city to be able to request that assistance, no matter how small the developer or the property owner is, up to very large developments that you see in front of you today. Our application, as I mentioned, is posted online. It's completed by the property owner and then submitted to Economic Development. We do bring, just as we do in an RFP, a community panel comes in to review the application, as well as technical experts who make a recommendation to me. We require them to go out into the community, take the project out into the community, and gain the community's input and thoughts on this particular project before we bring it forward to council. Should we continue moving forward, that the panels concurred, the community likes the project, or the staff would negotiate the development agreement, and we do bring it forward for city council consideration. The new development assistance application process, which started earlier this year, allows, what I love about it is it allows the conversation with City Council to begin immediately on the project. Before we ever move forward, before we bring this out to into community outreach and to others, is to really gain the thoughts of council and to ensure that the project is something that they are, they believe is sustainable and believe is something that's missing in the market, and that it is something that they'd like to see. Our redevelopment impacts of Giblet, we've done 22 projects since 1996, and I know it seems to the council like it should be a lot more projects than that. It always feels like we're bringing something forward, but we have done 22 since 1996, and that has brought into the city approximately 3,700 multifamily and student housing units, just over 5 million square feet of office space, 900,000 square feet of retail and restaurant space, about 1,200 hotel rooms, 680,000 square feet of higher education space, and just over 8,000 structured parking places. When we look at the financial impacts of Giblet, the city has seen about 18,000 new jobs that have come into the projects, and because of the projects created by Giblet, with about $1 billion in new payroll. $3 billion in construction capital investment have come through those projects, $35 million in construction sales tax to the city, $17 million of ongoing annual tax impact to the city, and just under $100 million on an annual impact to Maricopa County and to the school districts. Just under $100 million to Maricopa County and the school districts in impact, and $250 million to the state of Arizona. I think one of the projects that particularly just kind of set the stage as I think about it, that particularly comes to mind of how Giblet's been a benefit to both the city and the school districts, I think of Arizona Center. So Arizona Center back in the 80s was single lots, it was old warehouses, it was older buildings, and a developer came in and assembled all of those properties. All combined together, those properties paid approximately $130,000 in property tax on an annual basis. The developer assembled the properties and built the project known and now as Arizona Center. Arizona Center came off the Giblet. It did appreciate a Giblet for just over, what was that, about 13 years. It came off the Giblet in 2011, and as it came off the Giblet this year, it pays approximately $3.6 million in property tax to all taxing jurisdictions. So it was really leveraged as a tool to bring redevelopment, to get projects down into the central city, but also as a mechanism in the future of providing additional revenue sources to all taxing jurisdictions. So just one of those projects that we think of that was on the Giblet, was a redevelopment property, was a redevelopment, was on the Giblet, and now has come off, and what that benefit has been. So Chairwoman, members of the subcommittee, with that, Zandon and I would be happy to take any questions you might have.
Do any of my colleagues have any questions? Councilman Nowakowski.
Well, some comments, right? First of all, I think Laura and myself are very familiar with the Arizona Center before it was built. We actually went to St. Mary's, right where the Arizona Center is built on. So we understand the great improvement of that area. But you know, one of the, oh, go ahead.
I think I protested during that time.
Yep. So one of the things that's so great about the Giblet program is really I remember Phil Gordon when he was mayor. One of the things, it was so hard to attract businesses to downtown, and we really didn't have that many tools to really attract corporations or businesses. So one of the things that we used was the Giblet, where it basically really helped out with that financing gap that Chris was talking about. It's really trying to do the infill development was hard, and especially to get loans in an area that wasn't known for development at that time. Then after that, all kinds of opportunities came up as when I first started about 12 years ago. We started looking at free art space. We started looking at set aside for ASU. We looked at parking as a benefit. We would ask the developer, would you provide parking for downtown? Would you set aside some retail for businesses that want to start in downtown? And all those set asides were really what made downtown what it is today. I mean, we have over 200 restaurants, and 80% of those restaurants, those bars and restaurants, are local businesses. And it was all because the majority of the Giblets created retail. They created space for local businesses to move in and just to show their product, and it just growed like wildflowers out there. So it's something really good. One of the things that we've been talking about is how can we maximize it even more so, and then we start looking, is there a way to actually, and I talked to Attorney Nick Wood saying, Nick, how can we use the Giblet incentive for outside? We're talking about Metro Center, we're talking about some redevelopment areas in South Phoenix where the light rail's going down. And is there any way that we can maybe relocate some of those funds that we can generate from Giblet to help revitalize those areas too? So that's something, a question that I have, Chris, is there any way to use some of that central business district funding for these redevelopment areas that are connecting to downtown through the light rail? And it's going to really benefit the light rail because we'll have workforce housing, student housing in South Phoenix, and even in the Metro Center area that needs way, way more development, where we can just revitalize that whole area, which will help out the downtown area at the same time. That's one question. I don't know if you have an answer to that.
Madam Chair, Councilman Nowakowski, the council has absolute purview over the funds that are generated by our Giblet program, the Downtown Reinvestment Fund. So at council's direction, we would love to look at any opportunities that you might have and guidance for us in utilizing those funds in other redevelopment areas.
Thank you.
You had another question?
Yeah, another question too is that we started that conversation, instead of just allocating 10% or 20% of affordable housing in a project, how can we create our own housing fund for the city of Phoenix and just let that grow, where we can start using our own fund to build affordable housing or workforce housing in downtown Phoenix? And how do you set that up? How do you start that? I know that we have $100,000 that's kind of our seed money to start this fund up, but is that possible to continue that and to grow that fund and then use that maybe not in the central business district, but maybe on the outskirts where it's connected through light rail or some bus routes that are going in there?
Madam Chair, Councilman Nowakowski, our housing director, Cindy Stotler, who oversees that fund, is looking at those options today as to what it could be utilized for. So I will work with her and get those answers back to you, but I would defer to her on the thoughts and plans. And again, I'm sure as she moves forward, her concept would be to come to council for your guidance and direction on how to use them. But I know she's looking at that opportunity now.
That's it. Thank you, Laura.
Laura, Chairwoman.
Councilwoman Stark.
Sorry, I called you Laura instead of Chairwoman. We had a long meeting yesterday. I'm really appreciative of this presentation and all the success we've had because of it. Great information, Chris. I want to just tap into what Councilman Nowakowski was saying. As far as affordable housing, I think it's important to have along transportation lines, but also in areas where school districts are trying to attract teachers who want to actually live in the district. So if there's a way we can look at that as well, and I'm sure we can work with Cindy Stotler on that. I think that's pretty important. I've talked to Washington Elementary School, and their superintendent, Superintendent Stanton, has said it's been very problematic trying to find affordable housing, and teachers do want to live fairly close to where they teach. I don't blame them. So if we could look at that as well, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Stark, absolutely. Just to give you an idea, here where Giblet's been used in downtown and workforce housing has been provided, or these projects are coming online now that will provide workforce housing, there are a number of the developers who have thought exactly along those lines of wanting to target school teachers and other industry sectors that are critical to be closer to the districts that they work in. So that is something that we, as council, gives us guidance and direction to use this tool outside of the central business district. It's absolutely something that we can work with the school districts on.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Chairwoman.
Councilman Waring, do you have any questions?
I do. You anticipated me. Thank you. So, Chris, is it possible to put, I think it was slide 10 back up?
Yes, sir, we're doing that
If
right
you don't
now.
get it, it's fine.
Yep,
Thank
let
you.
us.
If you don't do it, it's not a big deal, but
Nope, we'll get it, slide 10. Give me 1 second.
sure.
Yes, there we, that one?
Yes, I think that, yes, that's the one I was looking for. So, so I'll just pick one. I have not been, I respect my colleagues' opinions, and obviously your adroitness at using this tool to attract, at least theoretically, businesses and so forth. But I've had concerns going back quite a few years, and so I vote against these projects. Again, like it sounds like you expected my colleagues to be, you would think there's more of these. It seems like they come up all the time. I did actually know the number was in the low 20s. I don't know if I would have guessed 22, but I knew it was something like that. It seems like there's more. But can I ask, so this is a practical question. I have an office tower, something of office space. Is it possible that the office space right across the street could be receiving a tax break basically that I don't get? And we have the basically identical product.
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, yes, it can be so that one building is receiving a Giblet and another building is not receiving a Giblet. Typically, when you look at the buildings, particularly here in downtown Phoenix, some of them that were built in the 70s and 80s before the tool existed, that were built specifically for a bank or specifically for another use, did not receive a Giblet. In downtown, those buildings are still on full ad valorem property tax. But to your point, you could have one, let's use an example. The Wells Fargo building is on one side of the street and Renaissance is on the other side of the street. One has a Giblet and one does not.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the candor of your answer. So I'm looking at these, looks like you got 6 different items. I mean, you could own a parking lot that you rent out to people or a building or what have you. And then right across the street, somebody's getting a Giblet. Obviously, you can imagine how the owner of one parking structure would feel about the owner of another or the city itself when that's the case. I've always felt that that's picking winners and losers has become a cliche. So pick something else, I guess. But I have an issue with that. I know business owners who have an issue with that. I assume that since the 70s and 80s, or certainly since 1996, there have been plenty of projects in Phoenix in these 6 categories that I'm looking at on page 10 that didn't get a Giblet in the city of Phoenix, correct?
In the entire city of Phoenix, Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, you are correct.
So I mean, my point is, you don't have to get one of these to do a project in one of these categories, or frankly, any other. I'm also just concerned about existing businesses and how they feel when something's going up right across the street that's getting a deal that we didn't give to them. I just think that sends a message that isn't great, frankly. It's nothing against the projects. I found myself, because of this, voting against projects that otherwise were very meritorious. And you and I have discussed this many times in the past. I struggle with that concept. I would also say, so if we give you a tax break, can you explain how that affects other taxpayers who aren't getting that break?
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, I'd be happy to. So you'll have to bear with me because it's a little more complicated than one gets it and one doesn't.
I understand.
So as we look at an area, and school districts are the predominant receiver of property tax in any area in all cities across Arizona, but let's use the city of Phoenix solely as that example. So if you are in a school district and a property receives a Giblet, in 2009, the Education Equalization Program was changed by legislature. This didn't exist until 2009. That program was changed. School districts are the only taxing jurisdiction that has a guaranteed funding limit, a GFL, in Maricopa County or in Arizona, where that guaranteed funding limit they know that they need $1 million budget to be able to educate the children that are there, and I'm just using a number, to be able to educate the children are there. They have a budget of $1 million, and that budget has a guaranteed funding limit, and they have to hit that nummy. They get it through property tax, they get it through bonds, through other mechanisms, but if they have a shortfall, it's made up by that guaranteed funding limit, that education equalization. In 2009, the legislature changed the Education Equalization Program to now be that if there was a Giblet, if a Giblet comes online and a property comes online with a Giblet, it has to be considered as though it's paying its full ad valorem property tax, that it's on full ad valorem property tax. So the education funding, the guaranteed funding limit through education equalization does not apply to that particular building. So in that instance, properties in that school district then have to make up the difference of that project. But similar to my example of the Arizona Center, that it was paying $130,000 and now paying $3.6 million on property tax, and that's the answer to your question. I think, well, I guess I should stop there.
If I wanted to boil down what you just said, and I appreciate the preciseness of your answer, but let's just use your $1 million example. So the schools need $1 million to run their operations. If you take $1,000 of that $1 million away, it has to be made up.
Mhm.
So if you cut the taxes of one project by $1,000, if I basically translated what you just said from, no offense, Chris, kind of bureaucrat-ese into real English, if you took away $1,000, the other, assuming there are no other Giblets, let's just say there's 10 properties, one of them has a Giblet, the other 9 don't. The other 9 have to make up that $1,000.
Well,
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, that's correct.
So basically, by giving the deal to one, you're raising the taxes of the other. Because the money's got to be made up somewhere. Somebody else is paying, not them.
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, and no argument. You are very factual in that. What we use the tool to leverage is the school districts. As you look at property tax in some of our school districts, it's higher than it would be in other areas because we have a significant number of vacant land sites, or we have other uses that are within that area that don't pay property tax. Our goal of leveraging this tool is to bring other taxpayers into the market to be able to elevate the amount of revenue through multiple projects. You're correct, on the very short term, on that 8-year term, you are correct. Others have to make it up. When we hit that 9th year, the goal is that those projects now pay full ad valorem property tax, thereby lowering the property tax of everyone else in the district.
And I get, Madam Chair, Chris, that you're trying to effectively expand the size of the pie. Instead of buying an 8-inch pie, pizza or apple, you're now you're trying to expand it to a 10-inch circumference pie or something like that. And then everybody benefits. But not everybody benefits equally because, of course, the other 9 are subsidizing the costs of the 10th, which if the other 9 have been in that area for decades and been good tax-paying citizens, it's easy for us to say, well, it's only 8 extra years. But you know what? If I'm paying those taxes, I may not see it quite that way. I may be like, why am I doing this at all? I get the theory, but in theory, communism works. Theories aren't always what they're all cracked up to be. So we might be growing the pie, we might not, but regardless, the one developer or business owner is getting a break everybody else isn't getting. And with 22 projects in Phoenix, that means there are thousands of projects who aren't getting this, but hundreds or thousands that are sort of subsidizing this. And that's where I have an issue. I agree with, both Councilman Nowakowski and Councilwoman Stark, but I think it was Michael specific. I think he singled out, a couple specific projects or one specific project at least. I mean, he's right. A lot of these projects, as I said at the outset, are great projects. Happy to have them. But I just wonder how many might have gone forward anyway, but they know that this is out there. They know that they can, the government is going to pick who gets this tax break. And so they can find a way to be one of the lucky 22, and everybody else is going to have to pay, even if it's just a little bit. It can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars. I mean, I don't know how that gets tracked over time, but it's enough of incentive that they come to us in the first place and spend the time and money to get this break. So it's clearly a worthwhile pursuit in their eyes, or they wouldn't be doing it. Nobody would be using the project. On another note, and I don't expect to change hearts and minds, it's just something else to think about for the people who might be watching at home about the merits of this and whether this makes sense. And if you sat in a different perspective of a longtime business owner or somebody who's right across the street, who theoretically their project could be built at exactly the same time. It doesn't have to be a long-term business owner. I don't know that I'd necessarily be that thrilled about working with Phoenix again if I had that experience, if it was me. Not speaking for every business owner, but I could see how that would rub people the wrong way. The legislature, as you suggested, 2009, but other times as well. Can you talk about some of the changes? Because this has been somewhat much discussed at the legislature, in the last decade, this system. Can you talk about some of the changes that have been enacted?
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, I'd be happy to. If I could just even go back and provide one point of clarification and not arguing with you at all, but if the land
You can argue with me, Chris. It's okay. Why should you be different than everybody else?
I always enjoy
like
arguing with you in our briefings. That's one of the highlights of my month is our briefings and being able to have these discussions with you. As
we will reduce it, Chris, to aggressive banter. That sounds so much better than arguing.
Perfect. As we look at, and I don't disagree with your analysis, but as we look at the vacant land sites that would then be providing now taxing, tax revenue in the future into those taxing jurisdictions, if that property is, and let's make this up, it's paying $10,000 a year in property tax today, it continues to pay $10,000 in property tax, and with appreciation, maybe it pays 10.5 next year and 10.7 the year after, and it moves forward. There's still that gap that would be that the other taxpayers, to meet those tax requirements of all the taxing jurisdictions, would have to pay. So while I don't disagree with you that the education equalization shifts onto the others, it does increase the value and the revenue coming in from all of the other properties that otherwise over time would have just stayed flat as vacant land. So I just wanted to add that in there.
Fair enough.
So as we look at, your question was the number of times this has changed over the years. So again, it was put in place pre-1996, it was called possessory interest tax. It changed to Giblet in 1996, and that provided for a longer term. From 1996 to 2010, it provided for a longer term that projects could stay on the Giblet. In 2010, legislature revisited that. It was capped at 25 years. And it also then provided for a producer price index increase on the excise tax, so that the excise tax didn't remain flat. It actually increased based on producer price index in 2010. In 2016, it was changed again at legislature to then simply be an 8-year abatement with no 17-year tail on an excise tax. So then in 2016, it became not 25 years. The longest that could be granted on a Giblet was an 8-year abatement. There have been other minor changes since then, but in the timing, those are the major ones that have happened So from a longer extensive time until 2010, 25-year in excise tax from 2010 to 2016, and then the modification to only an 8-year abatement in 2016.
Okay, so, Madam Chair, so
Go ahead.
before we might have been offering the full 25 years, now we're only offering 8, but we're still getting projects that are interested. That fact-based statement.
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, yes, as we've looked at the tool, even on the excise tax at the 25 years, when we went to 9 years, the 9th year when it came off the abatement and went into the 9th year of the excise tax, we do an extensive financial analysis on each project as it comes through to make a staff recommendation as to how long the project should be on a Giblet. So let me use an example for you of the link. So the link is being constructed in 3 phases. And when it came through, it was still at a time when a 25-year Giblet was something that we could offer. And on phase 1, our financial analysis showed that the project needed the full 25 years because of the extensive amount of infrastructure that a project that large needed to build. It's 29 stories, 25 stories, and 19 stories of mixed-use product. There was significant amounts of demolition, of abatement, of archaeological issues, of old infrastructure issues, so things that had to be done to make the first phase work. As Economic Development conducted its financial analysis, although requested for 25 years on the other 2 buildings, we did our financial analysis and went back to the developer, and even though we could offer the full 25 years, we went on buildings 2 and 3, we offered the 8-year abatement because in our financial model, it showed that the benefit was really in the 8 years of abatement and not in the 9th year when excise tax started. The developer, a very thoughtful developer, did their analysis and agreed with us. And what we brought forward to council was building 1 has the 8-year abatement, then the 17-year tail to 25 years. The next 2 buildings, even though we could do 25 years, we only did the 8-year abatement.
I mean, it's not surprising that, people would ask for the world, and then if they just get some slice of that, then they're happy. And I don't mean to be argumentative, even if I jokingly try to call it something else. I appreciate your work. This is in no way a reflection. First of all, you didn't invent the program, so it's not your program. It's just you're trying to use a tool in what you perceive as your toolbox. I've obviously had a different view. We have had some similar discussions to what we're having right now in the past. I was excited to see this, and I appreciate Chairwoman Pastor, putting this on the agenda. I appreciate that very much, actually, because I do think it's helpful because this does come up quite a bit. I did have one more. So there are 22 in Phoenix. Do you know how many there are statewide? Because other cities can do this as well. I'm just curious, what percentage of these are in Phoenix?
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, we'll get you that number. It's actually
Okay.
posted by law on the county assessor's website,
Yeah.
the county treasurer's website. I apologize. It's actually posted, all of the Giblets there. And the interesting thing is when it's posted, each city's attorney interpret the law a little bit different. And so some of the cities only post ones that have a full commercial economic development giblet, like we would bring forward to you, the 22 that we have here that economic development is responsible for. And that's a number of cities make that determination. Other cities' attorney make the determination that any property that has private transactions in them that otherwise aren't paying full ad valorem property tax should be posted as well. So Phoenix, a city attorney, is one that's made that determination. So if you look at the number of projects that are on for the city of Phoenix, all of our affordable housing projects, all of our subsidized housing projects, our Section 8, all of our airport leases, all of our convention center leases, all of those items that you wouldn't think of as the traditional giblet that we have, but our attorney has taken a conservative approach and in the interest of transparency to our citizens has posted everything that has private activity that is not paying full ad valorem property tax. So each city, because of the way they report them, that percentage is really hard to gauge. What I could get for you is grab the ones that we think of as traditional economic development across the state and give you that percentage based on our population.
Part of the reason I was asking, Chris, Madam Chair, was, if we're more user-friendly with these than, say, Scottsdale or some other city, I'm just picking a name, is the theory that we might be getting projects we might not otherwise get because we're willing to do things in this area that other cities aren't?
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, as we do our financial analysis, as staff does its financial analysis, I would, trust me, if I didn't have to come forward asking for this tool for a project, I would most definitely not bring it forward. In staff's professional opinion, where these projects and analysis is done, it's because it is the only way to get the project to move forward. To answer your question, there are a number of cities who've used the tool very effectively and in greater numbers than the city of Phoenix has used it here in Arizona to draw the redevelopment that they want and are using it today to draw the redevelopment they want. We don't typically use it as a competition to compete against other cities to say, wow, you would have built in insert city name here, but we're going to give you the tool, so we'd rather have you build in downtown Phoenix. We actually use it not to have it pick a city in which to develop, but we would use it to be able to make it so the project could pencil. In my tenure with the city, we've never used it once where a project has come forward and said, we're thinking about, Chandler or Tempe or Goodyear, and if you give us this, we'll do this here. It's never been used that way in my entire tenure with the city.
Thank you. I appreciate your candor in answering and so forth, and hope I wasn't too down on your tool there. But Madam Chair, I do appreciate you putting this on the agenda and indulging me by letting me ask so many questions. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilman Waring. It was good to hear you back. We haven't heard you like this since quite some time, so I was enjoying it.
Want to hear me more, because that can be arranged?
No, that's it. Well, I will call you.
Okay, thank you. I
Okay.
appreciate that.
So if everybody's okay with it, we're going to move forward to item number 3. Anybody else have any questions?
Councilwoman, I think we may have a couple of public comment.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Sure, go ahead.
Our first public comment is Nicholas Wood.
Madam Chair, members of the sub. Can you hear me okay? Sounds like an echo.
We can hear
Nick
you.
Woods. Okay, Nick Woods, Snell and Wilmer 1, Arizona Center, Phoenix, and I've been blessed with the ability to work on about 18 of those 22 Gplets that Chris Mackey mentioned in downtown Phoenix. One thing I wanted to comment on was, the need for some additional affordability factors for housing. So rather than talk about the things downtown, I want to touch on something that Chris touched on and that Councilman Nowakowski asked me about actually this morning. And that was utilizing this as a means of encouraging development of housing that has affordability factors built in, whether it's workforce housing, whether it's affordable housing, and that is in places like around Metro Center. About 10 years ago, I assisted in creating the redevelopment area in that area. And what the Gplet statute permits, and what Chris Mackey mentioned, it really hasn't been used for years and years, and that is the ability outside of the central business district to do a Gplet up to 25 years, whereby the first 10 years of the Gplet, the excise tax is actually discounted by an amount of 20%. And as Chris mentioned, in addition to the fact that you get that 20% discount for those first 10 years, the applicable excise tax itself is actually discounted as against the ad valorem tax that would otherwise be paid. And that's probably about a 10% savings. So initially during the first 10 years of the Gplet, the overall savings for the developer as against ad valorem tax would probably approach 30%. And then it would continue at about probably 10% savings, give or take a couple of percentage points from year 11 through whatever the term is up to 25 years. So I've always been a supporter of using Gplet mechanism in order to assist by encouraging development with affordability factors built in redevelopment areas outside of the central business district. Thank you.
And then our next and final speaker is Walter Gray.
Thank you. I guess my feeling is that, while the Giblet does increase the money for schools and increases the value of the property that was once vacant, the real benefit is to the surrounding properties. The surrounding properties increase in value, so, they actually pay a higher tax, and as such, or with their increased value, they can pay a higher tax and thereby offset the fact that you're giving a subsidy to the adjacent building. So my feeling is that, we don't need the Giblet, that we could simply tax existing properties in the downtown area or develop a fund of something, some kind of mechanism to redevelop less desirable properties, which will benefit the very people who put up the money. So, and really, I don't see the Giblet used outside of downtown Phoenix and Metro Center, South Phoenix. When you're talking about housing or parking lots or things like that, what we need outside of downtown Phoenix is jobs. We need industrial jobs, healthcare jobs, solar production jobs, office, customer service jobs, office work. So that's the real need. And if the Giblet doesn't work out for that need, then we need to develop new legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to both constituents of Phoenix or partners of Phoenix. Thank you for your comments. We will be moving to item number 3, authorization to enter into an agreement for FY 2020 and 2021 Tourism and Hospitality Advisory Board.
Chairman Pastor, members of the subcommittee, John Chan, Convention Center Director, will provide this presentation.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. Today we are requesting authorization to enter into a contract with the Greater Phoenix Convention and Visitors Bureau for fiscal year 2021 tourism and hospitality funding as recommended by the Tourism and Hospitality Advisory Board. So just a little bit of background about the board. It includes representatives from the tourism industry, and their charge is to meet annually to evaluate and recommend to the City Council a program of work that includes projects that promote Phoenix as a destination, attracts visitors to Phoenix through conventions, trade shows, and special events, promotes tourism for the city, and generates hotel room night bookings by visitors. So annual funding is derived from the hospitality's industry share of visitor-generated excise taxes, which is primarily from hotel rooms and rental cars. There is a 14-member board that is appointed by the mayor and city council, and the board is comprised of 8 hoteliers, 1 representing each council district. There's also 2 hospitality sector representatives, 3 city representatives, and 1 representative from the Convention and Visitors Bureau. I wanted to call attention to the bottom of the screen. There is a website for members of the audience that that are interested or want to get more information about the board. So the best way is through the easiest way is to contact us through the phoenixconventioncenter.com contact us link on our website. So for fiscal year 2020-2021, $500,000 in funding is available, and the proposed scope of works includes supporting convention groups that will be held here in the city of Phoenix between January of 2021 and July of 2023. There's also an allocation to support the development of new business for the city. And then the last 2 items are in support of mega events, the 2023 NFL Super Bowl and the 2024 Men's Final Four. It's worth noting that the last 2 items are going to be multi-year requests. The other thing of note is that these THAB funds, the way they're utilized, they're not standalone, so they are always leveraged with other non-city funds as part of the program. And in terms of return on investment, for every dollar in THAB funds that is invested, it generates approximately $450 in direct spending. So this is the recommendation. The THAB board met on November 17th and unanimously approved the proposed scope of work and recommends that the City Council approve this request for funding. With that, that concludes my presentation. Be happy to take any questions from the subcommittee.
Anyone have any questions? No one? Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. There is a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anybody that would like to be a nay? Okay, the motion passes.
Thank you.
Call to the public. Do we have any members call to the public?
Chairwoman, we do not.
Okay. Any future agenda items? Anyone? All right, meeting adjourned. Woo-hoo!